Commissioner Goodell, thank you so much for giving us some time today. It's a historic week. The game announced for the MCG starting in 2026, the NFL bringing a regular season fixture down under. My first question would be, what made now the right time for Australia to get a regular season game?
Well, I think it was more our planning. As we sort of evolve our regular season game, as you know, we want to continue to play around the world and become a global sport. Australia was always on our map. I think we wanted to learn as we evolved the series from some of the other events. And I think now we feel comfortable that the long trip is something that we can deal with. We can handle the logisticals and competitive issues. And we also think the market, I think it's pretty obvious by the excitement that the market's ready. And this is, I think, the spark that will light the flame.
Talk about the market there. What do you feel like the potential for our market is, both off the field and on the field? We know some of the talent that's obviously exhibited in the NFL on Sundays and the other days that we get to enjoy football. But what do you think that potency is there for the market, both on the playing side of things and then fan base?
Well, you see it in the Super Bowl. I mean, Jordan Mailata is, obviously is an Australian guy and an incredible player. And so I think you see, the one thing I know about Australia is that they are sportsmen and they love sport. And I think this is an opportunity for us to share our game in person with a regular season game. And I think this will be a great event for us. And I'm glad we have the 18 months build up in some ways, but also I think to really not just promote it, but also to make sure we get it absolutely right.
Well, you mentioned the 18 months build up there, and you said the logistics is something that you've looked at and looking to overcome and get you've clearly got past that point to give it the big green tick, and here we come down under. On those logistics, Australians know. We've flown around the world. By the time we're 7 or 8 years old, we've done a big flight across. Most of us are lucky enough to get that opportunity. We know it's a long way. So how did you approach those logistical hurdles, and how were the teams or the Rams in particular, how did they approach that, and how have they looked to overcome it and got comfortable with it?
Well, the Rams selected this as their market. It's something that they wanted to be able to market further in Australia. And they were very keen on playing a regular season game. That was not the issue. The issue for us is at the right timing as we look at our strategy globally and where we want to play. We have a limited number of games we can play right now, and so we're continuing to expand that and push the limits on that. So it was the right time, and to play at the MCG and it's going to be to us it's a thrill of a lifetime.
I know you've been to the NFL's, it's expanded throughout the globe, continental Europe into South America. You've seen some of those crowds and witnessed that. In terms of an Australian crowd, do you have any inkling, have you got any feedback or thoughts on what 100,000 screaming Aussies at an NFL game might look like to you and sound like?
I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. No, I think, the one thing that they were consistently confident about was it doesn't matter what time you play the game, there'll be over 100,000 people there. And, in an historic stadium with people who love sports and to share this experience, I think I will be there, my family will be there. We can't wait.
You mentioned what time to play the game. That's a big question that people are asking. We've, heard likely early in the season. It's still obviously to be sorted out. When it comes to the day of the week, we saw obviously the great success with Brazil this year, and the NFL being able to stage a game Friday night US time. For us, it was a delightful Saturday morning down at Bondi Beach with a launch party. That was a great way to start your weekend. 25 degrees Celsius outside, sunny, and watching football at the beach. For the NFL, with things like Friday night football, Friday night lights, as we might call it with high school, how does that play into when we might be able to see that game staged in terms of a day or a time?
We're just going to have a lot of work to do on that. We have to decide the media partner here in the States also. We have to obviously work on the media relationship in Australia. I think we have to work with the AFL. It'll be somewhere close to their playoffs, and so we've already had lots of discussions. I had a call a couple of weeks ago with their leadership. We want to do it in a cooperative way and try to figure out the right way to balance all the different interests and give the Australian fans what they really want, which is a fun, competitive, and strong game.
You mentioned that you've got a feel for the sporting appetite that Australia has down there, and we've seen the numbers grow, the viewership grow with American football. Was there a point over the last few years where there was a spike or there was something that really ticked this over from saying, oh, this is, Australia, they're kind of on the radar to host a game, maybe it's a bit fanciful, how are we going to overcome this? And something clicked, a hurdle was leapt over, and we really launched onto the radar for the NFL as a host city or a host nation?
Yeah, I don't think it's one thing. I think it's the consistent fan growth, the consistent interest in the game through our media partners and otherwise. I think we always knew there was that fan base and that desire to have the game there. And then, for us in our overall strategy from a global standpoint, we felt it was the right time to do this. We played in Brazil, one of our longer trips. It was probably 11 or 12-hour trip, depending on where you were coming from. This will be a little bit more of an extension of that. But I think we're ready for that. I think the teams are, and I think we have learned enough, I think, to be able to handle the operational and competitive side. And now we just have to find the right balance between the fans in Australia and the fans in the U.S.
There's obviously the fan appetite, and then we know there's the city appetite. Melbourne has emerged, and the MCG is an iconic ground, 100,000 fans.
Sure.
It's clear were the reasons why it would be a great host city. There were some other cities involved. Sydney and Perth were both rumoured. What was it that drove Melbourne to the top of the list there?
Well, they are all great cities, and I think we could have been successful in any of those cities, but we really felt this was the right place, primarily because of MCG, primarily because I think it has so many world-class sporting events there, including the Australian Open, which I just finished watching. And so from our standpoint, it just felt like the right place. I would imagine that as we develop this and we evolve, that we'll see other cities come into the fold, but for us, this was the right spot.
Well, you mentioned it is a great city that hosts sporting events, and the crossover with the NFL was something that has already begun. We saw Joe Burrow was in town for the Australian Open,
yeah,
Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
We talked Larry Fitzgerald was in town.
Yeah. No, I heard from several of them. Yeah.
And the reviews on, they did a little pre-work there. Did they provide any reviews on the fine city of Melbourne?
Well, I didn't give them too much inside information, but they all say it's one of their favorite events, favorite places to go, and that starts to get around with our players, and our players love to travel. And I think this will be an exciting opportunity for them.
Well, on the players, I know it's early days. This just came out. We had the official announcement yesterday. But when it comes to the players, we just spoke to Puka Nacua, obviously on the Rams, going to be a huge part of that, one of the faces of the Rams, and he was absolutely excited. The words he used, they were safe for Disney, I can say. He said it was freaking unbelievable, so exciting. I had to check that one quickly, but he was clearly pumped up. Have you had any early feedback from some of the players about, they're making a big trip, but what it might be like setting that stage and performing out there?
Yeah, I was asking Andrew Whitworth about it early this morning, who obviously is no longer playing, but one of the bigger players I've seen. And I asked Jordan about it when we got down to Brazil, and I said, how was the trip? Well, for a big guy like that, that's a tough trip. He couldn't have been more positive about it. And Andrew said, listen, Australia is worth the trip. And so he was very positive about it. I haven't seen any of the active guys yet, but I have no doubt that the Rams had discussed this with a number of their veteran players and their leadership, and I assume that there's a great deal of enthusiasm.
What does success look like for these games, for the MCG hosting, for Melbourne hosting? What, in your mind, does success look like after the dust has settled and we've had this extravaganza of a first historic game in Australia in the regular season?
Well, I think it's going to be measured on a lot of things. Obviously attendance is a big part. Getting the right media arrangements and make sure that we reach the broadest audience is another big part of it. The people have a fun time, and it sort of lights the flame for football in Australia. I think that's what we see this as. And then we have to do our job to bring more football, more access on a year-round basis. This can't be a one event and expect that that's going to continue to grow our game in Australia. We are committed. We want to be there. We'd love to see kids playing. Love to see them playing flag or tackle football. So we'll continue all those efforts to make sure we're getting the game in the hands of people in Australia.
On those kids playing, we've seen the rising rate. We know we're known for punters. We've been known for punters for decades. The great work that Pro Kick do. We've seen, all decade teams feature Australians before. When you think back to someone like Darren Bennett. But now we're seeing the positional players emerge. There's multiple tight ends on practice squads. The offensive linemen, not just Jordan Mailata, but Daniel Fa'alele.
Sure.
Laken Vakalai is on the Eagles practice squad as an international player. Is there anything that you've seen, or even speaking to teams, that has made our part of the world particularly successful, maybe outkicking their coverage, to use a familiar phrase, when it comes to representation on the paddock?
I would tell you, I think it comes down to being a great athlete. Ultimately, you have great athletes there, both men and women. And I think from our standpoint, if somebody's determined to make that transition, obviously there's a path to do that. And I think we've opened up now an access opportunity on the Gold Coast to be able to have an academy there and to give people the opportunities to sort of understand the game a little better, get the fundamentals down. So if they do want to play and make that transition, they can come back to the U.S., probably play college football, and then hopefully get to the NFL level. I have no doubt that there are plenty of athletes in Australia that could do that.
From athletes to opponents. Look, astute fans back home in Australia may have gone onto the Rams website, where the beauty of the NFL schedule is that you do see certain divisions that come in the rotation. And they've started looking at the home opponents that the Rams might boast in 2026.
See, that means they're good fans.
They are, and they know that quite often, and it's not always the case, but most of the time it's an out-of-division opponent that does get there. So there's a couple of teams that have grabbed attention off the bat there. The Giants, maybe a direct flight from New York. The Kansas City Chiefs and all the star power that they bring. LA Chargers, I mean, it's a convenience of LA to LA, a little LA derby in Sydney. And then that team out of North Texas, the Dallas Cowboys, also on the list. Are there any teams that perhaps you'd like to see there, or any hints, maybe color schemes that we could perhaps prepare to see alongside a team like the Rams hosting?
I guess I'd answer it this way. You name some of them, so we'll see. We got a lot of work to do on that level. I have no doubt that we'll have a great matchup, though, for the fans over there.
And my final question, we expect yourself will be coming down to Australia and enjoying.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you're looking forward to? Obviously, Melbourne's got plenty to offer. Is there anything you're particularly looking forward to when you come down to our part of the world?
Hopefully seeing a little bit more of Australia. My family and I have been dying to get over there for a long time, and usually my schedule prevents that. But now I can come a little bit on business and hopefully get a little time to see the country.
Well, I thank you immensely for the time today, and congratulations on a historic week and a historic announcement. We look forward to seeing you down in our part of the world in 18 months or so.
I can't wait. It'll be fun.